All right, so welcome back. Next topic is context. So this is almost a bit of a meta topic. If you remember, we already briefly talked about this in the introduction. And the most important aspect is that we can't really predict in what context the mobile device or a mobile app is going to be used. And there's a lot of different ways we can look at context. So we have the environment that can involve things like how loud is it, is the user moving, and so on. We have a geometric context that can be like the geographic location of the user, or the position in terms of relative position to a starting point. We can have a social context, so are we in the middle of a crowd? Are people kind of expecting us to be quiet? Is it, for example, in the movie theater or so on? Might somebody be looking over my shoulder at my mobile device, and is there anything I don't want people to see? I have the activity, what's the user currently doing. That can be like a physical activity like jogging, or it can be like an activity on the device like taking a picture with the camera app. And I also have a device context, so what is the device itself actually capable of? So first of all, let's briefly talk about the device context. So we have quite a wide range of capabilities. If somebody says your app should run on an Android device, that doesn't basically say anything at all, because an Android device can be a 1-inch smartwatch, or it can be like a 12 or even 16-inch tablet thing. You could have basically no connectivity, or you can have LTE. You can have like I don't know, 64 kilobytes of RAM, maybe not 64, but maybe let's say half a megabyte, or you can have like 8 gigabytes of RAM, 8 CPU cores or one. It doesn't really stop there. So there's such a wide range of different devices that it doesn't really help you a lot to, so you can't kind of put them all into the same, like treat them all the same way. So that's not possible. So you need to do some sort of adaptation of your interface. And if you look at this from a web point of view, then you can do either server-side or device-side adaptation, and you can do it either statically or dynamically. So first of all, let's talk about server-side adaptation. And this is actually not something that people should be doing anymore, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it still happens. And the most fundamental way of doing this are the so-called browser switches. So that means that when you make a request to some sort of website with your mobile device, then the browser will send along this user agent string, and that gives you a bit of basic information about what device the browser is running on and what type of browser it is. So is it Firefox, or is it Chrome, or is it Edge? I mean, Edge actually is Chrome, if I remember correctly, but so it's technically still a separate thing. And also what operating system is it running on, and so on. And in some cases, and some old school websites kind of still do a decision statically based on that user agent, what type of content they deliver. And then sometimes that content doesn't really look suitable at all to your device, because it's using what people imagined a mobile device would be capable of in, I don't know, 2012. So this is generally not such a good idea anymore, but it still happens. And it also means that you would have to actually keep different types or different layouts, at least, of the content on the server for these different classes of device. And once these classes change, then you would actually need to adapt the stuff on your server. But that's exactly the point where this usually fails, at least in my opinion, because people are just not updating this regularly. And then as mobile devices evolve, these server-side adaptation approach stays behind and gets more and more outdated. So even if you try like dynamic transformation of these on the server side, sometimes this is also attempted. This is also kind of only here for historical reasons. So in the very early days of mobile internet usage, we had these so-called WML gateways, wireless markup language, which was kind of a very, very restricted subset of HTML. And you had actually dedicated servers that could transfer HTML into WML, and then that could be viewed on your mobile device. So if you had something like the good old Nokia 6310, then that actually had a WML browser. And in theory, you could then go to a regular website via this gateway, and it would be transferred into this low-end mobile representation. But of course, anytime the website wouldn't actually use perfectly standard HTML, this would fail. Then what has been used, or what people have been trying, was to also use something like XSLT, these XML style sheet transformations, to transform various representations of HTML into more suitable for mobile representations. Again, something that you always need to keep adapting. Opera browser had this sort of compression proxy for a while, and I think Chrome and Google offer something like that too. So that's basically just a proxy server that tries to strip out unnecessary data and maybe reduce image file sizes and so on, so you don't need quite as much data. And some content management systems also, of course, offer this approach that you have different templates depending on what device you're viewing that site on. But in general, in my opinion, all these server-side approaches aren't really really cut out for today's use cases and scenarios, because we have such a wide variety of mobile devices that you can't just like have 2 or 3 different templates and then all of them will be happy. So the more sensible approach by now is to do adaptation on the device side. That means to have some sort of dynamic layout for your content. For websites, this is by now usually handled using these so-called flex boxes that are part of CSS3. And if you have a dedicated app, an Android app, for example, then this is handled using so-called fragments. So here's a very nice example of what the fundamental idea here is. So if you have limited screen space, then you only see one fragment at a time, and the next fragment, so to say, in a sequence replaces the previous one. If you have more space above a certain limit, basically, then the fragments will actually be arranged side by side. And the same on a website with flex boxes. For a very narrow screen, like a phone in portrait mode, you will see the items sequentially and will have to scroll. And once you turn it or have more screen space, horizontal screen space, then things will arrange each into a side-by-side mode. So that's a more generic approach and also more flexible, because it takes into account the specific device that things are running on. In a more general sense, if you think back to these proxies I've been talking about, you can, of course, always also try to substitute one resource for the other when that resource is kind of running out. So, for example, if you have limited amount of data on your plan, so you want to substitute something for communication. You want to keep communication low, then you could, for example, do compression with a compression proxy and decompress it again on your mobile device. Then you need more CPU power, but you transfer less data. Or you have enough memory, then you can just cache a lot of things on your mobile device and don't have to transfer data. The other way around, if you have enough communication bandwidth but not enough memory, then you just transfer all the data every time a request is made and don't cache anything. So there's various trade-offs again to be made between the various resources you have available. on a mobile device, on the server and on the communications channel in between. But in general, as I said previously, it's probably a good idea to make at least the decisions about which substitution to make on the mobile device directly, because then you have more information available about what the actual, for example, the screen size is, and the browser that's running, is it portrait mode or landscape mode, and so on. So server-side decisions on the information adaptation are probably not such a good idea anymore.